Welcome. Don't adjust your dial. Welcome everyone to the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. I'm your host Michael Pickering. That's right, Lo-Fi's and low fidelity, low quality, in your face, messy as can be global news show. Here we're going to talk about that famous question: what's going on in the world today? I hope everyone's ready. It's Messy Monday, and time for that weekend recap, where we bring you 10 fast-paced headlines from across the globe, and then a piece of humanity to send you on your way for the week. So here's that news, fresh off that press. The following three stories all come from AP News International. We begin in Belarus. Belarus ramps up crackdown on protests, detains over 700. This weekend, things got worse for protesters, as the government still has over 500 of them arrested, and intends on sending them in front the courts for prosecution. Government has also stated that as protests have become increasingly organized, their response will likely become increasingly forceful. We'll be watching to see exactly how this unfolds throughout the week. Next up, Kyrgyzstan president declares new state of emergency. This new state of emergency lasts a full week and involves curfews, bans on rallies or large meetings, and uses the military to enforce all elements of the state of emergency. This could be a big swing in the opposite direction of what we saw last week, as protesters toppled the government, and the president signaled a future resignation. But with the military getting involved under the president's state of emergency, things can change very quickly. Keep your eyes open on this one, Lo-Fi listener. Lots going down this week. Now, an update to a 2-week-long story. Armenia-Azerbaijan report attacks despite ceasefire deal. The two countries had agreed upon a ceasefire when meeting in Russia at the end of last week, and it went into effect on Saturday, followed directly by both countries accusing the other of breaking that deal. On Monday, attacks continued, and Armenia and Azerbaijan continued blaming the other. Come on, peeps, enough is enough. Let's pull it together and de-escalate this thing. Times are tough out here for everyone. Let's try and help each other and chill a little bit. Now, moving forward, because we never move on from anything, the following three stories all come from Reuters World News. First up, EU to sanction Russia over Navalny poisoning, diplomats say. This isn't happening yet, but it's getting really close. Moscow says there is still no proof. The EU says Russia isn't doing enough to explain what happened. And now, this week, the EU is pulling things together and getting ready to target specific officials thought to be involved in the poisoning plot. We'll be watching for details by the end of the week and let you know what goes down. Now to South America we go. In Venezuela, rural heartland, angry Maduro supporters fuel protest wave. This is big news. Over the past 2 years, we've seen lots of large protests against Maduro, but also large counter-protests that were pro-Maduro. The idea that protests have begun amongst his supporters marks quite a turn. However, we'll have to wait and see just how this recent fuel from Iran and other aid from other countries will help the government and possibly be able to satisfy protesters' demands. Lots of moving pieces to this puzzle, listeners. We'll keep you posted for sure. Now, to a story that everyone speculated on last week. North Korea's Kim tearfully thanks troops, apologizes for failures. Of all the speculations we heard last week in regard to the 75-year anniversary of the ruling party being created that took place this weekend, none of them said that they expected Kim Jong-un to get tearful, choked up, and apologize to his people for failing to make their lives better. It's hard to say what this really means, if it means anything at all. All we can say is this is quite a departure from past messages from the leader. It's curious. Right in, Lo-Fi Nation. What do you make of this heartfelt speech by North Korea's leader? And our last 4 stories all come from the BBC, Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Science sections, respectively. Bangladesh to introduce death penalty for rape. This weekend, massive protests took place to voice anger and outrage over the government's handling, or lack thereof, of recent as well as past attacks against women in the country. This new ordinance is in response to the people's voice and comes directly from the president's office. And since Parliament is not in session at the moment, it will become the law of the land immediately. It's hard to say just how much this will satisfy the people, though, because much of the issue at hand is how investigations and court hearings are handled. The government has signaled it will address these concerns as well, but we'll have to see throughout the week what new measures are introduced. For our next story, Zimbabwe journalist. I was jailed for a month after exposing corruption. Listeners may remember 3 years ago when longtime President Robert Mugabe, who ruled the country for over 30 years, finally fell from power. There was a lot of hope for Zimbabwe at the time, that things would change and life would improve. Freedom would be had. This story here is about a journalist who reported on government corruption that directly led to the health minister being fired and brought up on charges. And as a result of that reporting, the journalist spent 45 days in prison. His story claims that things, for journalists, have gotten far worse since Mugabe was ousted. We'll be following this story closely and hope his latest message is left to be freely heard and read without reprisal from a corrupt government. For our next story, we travel back to South America. Andre Durap, Brazil's crime boss, goes on the run after release from prison. What can I say here? Another story about government corruption and the power of organized crime. You tell me, listener. So, this person is one of the biggest leaders of organized crime in Brazil. One of the Supreme Court justices in the country granted him release from prison to house arrest because he had served a year in jail without being brought to trial. Within hours, the High Court president suspended that ruling and ordered him back to jail immediately. But he was already gone. No one knows where he is. No one is talking about how it happened, and no one's talking about what's being done to find him. What do you think, Lo-Fi listener? Write in. I'm curious your thoughts. And a last piece of news to send you on your way for the week. Something to brighten up your day. Or your night. Planet Mars is at its biggest and brightest. You can look out there now, but on Tuesday, Mars, the Earth, and the Sun will all be in a straight line, and the big red giant will be at its biggest and brightest throughout the years. This alignment does happen every 2 years and 2 months, so if you miss it, you will get to see it again. You'll just have to wait a couple years. But forget that, do it now, tonight, tomorrow, both nights. Take a moment for yourself. A moment for all of us. Look to the sky, and remember when you look out there, it's not just you. It's all of us, looking to the stars together. You're never alone, Lo-Fi Nation. We're always here. And that's a brief snapshot of what's going on in the world today. Stay tuned for tomorrow's episode of Tuesday's Top 10. Always remember that Lofi Poli Sci is more than just me. It's the we that we be. Write in with questions or comments to lofipolisci@planetmail.com. Thanks for listening. Stay safe. Wash those hands. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. Pickering, signing off.